we're going to take a closer look at the backstroke pull. Now there are a lot of similarities between our two long axis strokes, backstroke and freestyle, but pull is one of those things where they actually differ quite drastically. I think that a great pull requires two things. One, good shoulder mobility, and two, practice. In a backstroke pull, in the initial part of that pull phase, we're really looking for two things to happen. One, we want to set our catch as soon as possible, and two, we want to get into our early vertical forearm as soon as possible. And for those things to happen, it requires a decent amount of shoulder mobility that we don't necessarily execute in our freestyle stroke, in our breaststroke stroke, or in our butterfly stroke. They all kind of get set up the same way. Backstroke's a little bit different, and we actually need to be able to turn our shoulder over a little bit more to turn that palm out behind us to try and enter on our pinky and our ring fingertips. And being able to enter on those ring fingertips is going to help us be able to turn our wrist in a little bit faster. And when we turn in our wrist in a little bit faster, we can also pull our forearm into that vertical position a little bit sooner. And the sooner we get into that early vertical forearm, the more efficient that our backstroke pull is. I said practicing the pull phase is super important, and it really is, because like we said, it's very different than the freestyle pull. It has a very different setup and feel than how we normally catch and get into early vertical forearm than in a stroke, and it has a different way that you move your arm through the propulsive phase of the pull as well. And so it requires a lot of practice to get used to that repetition. And it's, what's happening is every time we're able to practice that pull, we are, firing those nerves and getting used to doing that. We're building something called myelin sheath around our nerves, but that's, a topic for a different video. But basically that just means we're creating a stronger and stronger channel so that we can do it more and more often and more consistently. And so that kind of repetition is important. And we can do that repetition in a couple ways. I think that a great way to do it is doing some really isolated single arm backstroke, so you can really focus on pulling that arm exactly through that pull phase how you want, executing mobility to enter on the fingertips, being able to pull the wrist in, being able to get the forearm vertical, and then being able to keep that vertical position until you're ready to sweep that hand down past your hips. And so there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of different ways that we catch and hold the water, and then we add our rotation in. It's very, very tricky. And so I think really slowing it down, doing some single arm pull, isolating and focusing on that movement so we can build that repetition, so we can build that habit, so we can execute it, whether it's in a grueling set or in a race. And just a quick breakdown of that backstroke pull. Again, like we talked about, we're trying to enter the water on our ring and our pinky fingertip behind us. That helps us get our wrist bent so that when we put that hand in behind us, it's already bent in that catch position. And all we really have to do is pull that wrist down, set that early vertical forearm, and again, we need that shoulder mobility there. If you don't have the shoulder mobility, it's going to be very tough to get that forearm vertical up here, and it may take till down here. And then after we set that catch, we get that early vertical forearm. Again, we want to hold that water as much as possible through that pull phase. We're going to have a good rotation to make sure our hand is 2 to 3 inches below the water as we're sweeping it down. And then as we're getting past our rib cage, you're going to kind of finish with a flick. So you're going to finish by pushing that water again down towards the bottom of the pool, and then get yourself set up so your thumb can come up in that recovery. We're trying to get that thumb to come up first in our recovery, and then we want to keep a nice straight arm but a relaxed arm in our recovery, and our goal is to have a straight enough arm and a good enough rotation that our armpit is getting dry during the recovery phase, and again preparing to enter for that next stroke on the ring and pinky fingertips. So what we can do right now while we're out of the water, we're continue to work on that shoulder mobility. You know, some exercises that I love is just doing that palm to palm. You can do it against a wall. You can do it laying on the ground. You just start with your palm nice and flat on that surface behind you. Bring it up, mimic that backstroke stroke, and then place that palm on the surface above you. Again, whether it's your ground or your wall, doesn't matter. That's a great way to really improve that shoulder mobility. There's also quite a few other shoulder mobility exercises that we're doing in that dry land. All that's going to help us make sure that our shoulder can move exactly how we want it to move in our backstroke stroke. And then when we get back in the water, again, practice that isolated stroke, single arm, really focus on pulling that arm exactly where we want to pull it through so we can build that habit so that when we're ready to get up and push through a hard set or race a hard race, it's there, it's ready, and it's going to be as efficient as possible.